Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here with the Pro Wrestling Logic YouTube channel and the Against All Odds Impact review for the 12th of June 2021. Not a bad show. I mean, there's things on here that are definitely a fun run, but at the same time, I don't particularly care for these monthly specials with a company that doesn't need them or doesn't have enough story depth to warrant them. If you look at the show strictly on its own, it's a good show. If you look at the show in the context of the fact that they're extending their need by about 12 to 15 shows a year that don't need to be there, then I'm not necessarily a fan. I think it would be much better to have quarterly pay-per-views and a weekly television show rather than pushing for weekly or monthly specials. And I understand content is king and all of that, but at the same time I think it's negative in the long run. Anyway, opening video recap. Omega Reign starting with his AEW championship win, his Impact championship win, and Moose's rise, and then the kind of the clash that they're going to have. Sami Callihan and Tommy Dreamer defeat the Good Brothers, Anderson and Gallows, in a street fight. Basically is a weapons match almost immediately. And both teams spill to the outside of the ring pretty quickly, bringing out chairs and bats and bells in the ring and all sorts of other fun things. Dreamer and Callihan also bring out garbage cans, cookie sheets, chains, and pool cues along the way. Dreamer and Callihan manage to pretty well be dominant and in control the majority of the match. Match starts to go back and forth in the middle. Match becomes near fall trading with the baby faces coming out. I had a little bit, I'd say about 7 out of 8 times baby faces are ahead. Anderson gets a spine buster on Dreamer, and then it takes a magic killer through a table for another near fall. Callihan breaks up the pin, blocking that from being the end, and Callihan takes out both men with a baseball bat, pins Anderson for the win. It makes sense with the fact that they are going with Callihan against Omega down the road, but I'm not necessarily a fan for this. He certainly needed the win going into Slammiversary, but this match, I don't necessarily know that this was the way to start the show. Joe Doring with Violent by Design defeating Satoshi Kojima with Eddie Edwards. Basically, there's history with them in other organizations, specifically in Japan, but there really isn't a backstory within the confines of this organization. They basically don't feel each other out virtually at all. Doring cuts off Kojima and gets heat on him pretty quickly, working on his back primarily. Doring slams Kojima and whips him around, locks him into Boston Crab for a bit. Kojima eventually manages and dodges Doring, and then gets him with series machine gun chops, falling elbow, and then failed to hit a lariat. And then Doring hits a spine buster. Rhino gets involved, and Kojima takes care of him. Cross body by Doring, near fall. Kojima blocks the power bomb and nails a lariat to the back. Kojima cutter, and then Kojima goes for a lariat. Doring counters with a DVD and a power bomb for the win. I don't necessarily think that the Japanese talent winning is a good thing for the sake of the friendship or deal there. And then Decay cuts a promo about winning all the gold tonight. Trey Miguel, Rahit Raju, Petey Williams, Ace Austin, Chris Bay fight to a no contest in the 5-way number 1 contenders X Division match. All of these men have basically been chasing the championship. Match starts with Miguel and Austin. Uh, they pair up outside the ring. Um, Raju gets into a decent sequence with Williams and Austin, showing that he belongs with the two. And then Austin and Miguel take out everyone with dives out of the ring. They continue working together. Um, Everyone minus Raju gets into a big submission spot, and then Raju comes back and then breaks pretty much everything up. Raju then runs wild for a bit and then um, manages things on time and comes close to getting a win with a Falcon Arrow, Bay, and a falling elbow on Miguel. But then both people basically plan to make things work, and then there's a breakup. Raju and Miguel stay together with Raju on it once again, gets the upper hand. Bay comes back, takes down Raju, followed by Austin taking out Bay. Williams then comes back, hits Code Breaker for near fall there. Austin gets a near fall of his own and chases the Canadian Destroyer, or Williams chases the Canadian Destroyer. Austin goes for a superplex, but it gets into a top rope destroyer for near fall. Miguel breaking up the pin. Miguel goes for Meteora. Fulton comes in and um, interferes. Miguel takes out Williams and Bay and Raju. All men go after Fulton, but he basically slams everyone at the same time, looking like a monster. Fulton drags Austin on top of the competitors. Referee is having none of this. Fulton and Austin are, but anyway, it kind of is a situation where there's now no X Division challenger. W. Morrissey defeats Rich Swann. Happened pretty quickly over the span of a month. Speed versus power clash matchup. Swann gets offense in early, but obviously using his speed to his advantage. Morrissey hit power moves, but also gets hit with dives. Morrissey lands single strikes to take down his much smaller opponent. Morrissey starts getting a little arrogant and allows Swann to make a comeback, landing a 450 to the outside. But then they go one inside the ring. But then he goes for a Phoenix Splash. To be honest, I'm not a fan of F5s in matches like this, simply because, drawing attention to a larger wrestling company and or a larger wrestler in general, I don't think is good for business. But there's lots of things that wrestlers do that I don't think are good for business in 2021. Morrissey goes for choke slam, but Swann escapes and gets a cutter. Morrissey hits a big boot and then comes back with a couple of power bombs. Swann basically refuses to stay down. Morrissey lands a third power bomb for the win. Big win for him in the sense that he just beat a former Impact champion. Morrissey is a major build here. Tenille Dashwood with Caleb with a K defeats Jordana Grace with Rachel Ellering. Not necessarily a fan of this match, and I'm not a fan of Dashwood in general. Basic Dashwood match all the way around. Grace dominates early. Caleb comes in and provides distractions when necessary and assists, allowing Dashwood to cut her off. Grace is in control of the match. Grace makes a comeback using a strength advantage, and Dashwood gets thrown around. There's a hit of the double knee and a sliding elbow combo. And then there's the Vader bomb by Grace, and she's still unable to pin Dashwood. Grace is actually looking weaker than she's looked in Impact in a long while, if ever. Grace locks in a rear naked choke on Dashwood, and Caleb interferes, distracts the referee. Ellering takes him out. Grace let go and starts screaming at Ellering not to help her, allowing Dashwood to recover and get the win. I guess we're going to Grace and Ellering at some point. Grace hits a Michinoku driver on Caleb after she snaps, Brian Myers and Sam Beal talk about studying the show. Jake something walk by and tells Beal that he shouldn't take advice from Myers, who then talks trash about something. This is just weak and it's time filler. Knockouts Tag Team Championship, Fire and Flav, Hogan and Steels defeat Susan and Kimberly to retain the tag team titles. Women's tag team titles, basically they've been going back and forth for a while. Um, Both are actually heel teams. Um, Steels and Hogan work minor babyface. Steels gets cut off from the corner and worked on by Lee and Susan for a while. Hogan gets a hot tag and goes up against Susan. Um, the match then goes into a four-way with all the women in the ring at the same time. They trade near falls. Susan gets a near fall. Lee hits a swanton bomb. Steels gets a near fall after a superplex at the end. Steels hits a frog splash on Susan for the win. Fine match, but it could have not been on the show and it would have been fine. Um, you know, then we go to Tag Team Championship. Violent by Design, Rhino and Diener with Eric Young defeats Decay, Crazy Steve, and Black Taurus to retain the Tag Team Championships. Story of the match is pretty basic. Steve gets in Diener's head early, and even when Young is pushing and pushing, Diener is the weaker of the two. Rhino comes in, Violent by Design gains control, but when Diener comes in, they lose it. Taurus gets cut off at the midpoint of the match, and Diener returns to the ring. Decay slowly regains control of the match every once in a while. Match comes down to Diener and Crazy Steve, who end up getting close. Diener then hits a crossface, but Diener makes it to the ropes. Steve hits another near fall with what looks like a spinning pedigree style move. Diener keeps kicking out, but Black Taurus comes in, hits a pop-up Samoan drop and a senton on Steve for near fall. Taurus and Rhino, easy for me to say, basically take each other out. Rhino recovers, takes out Steve. Diener hits a DDT and picks up a win. And then we get a promo from Steve McChin on how time is torture and he has a lot of time. Weak thing, I guess first half of the main event. Knockouts champion Deonna Purrazzo defeats Rosemary to retain. I've really liked Rosemary's development over the last several months. Actually, over the last year or so. Rosemary starts the match with control and hits a couple of really good offensive flurries. She drops Purrazzo with an exploder on the ramp, but Rosemary doesn't follow up quickly enough, and Purrazzo is able to recover. And Rosemary gets her hand injured in between the ring post and otherwise. And then works an arm through and stretching and swinging the arm down over and over again. Rosemary tries to back away and chase with the as above so below, but Purrazzo quickly brings her down a second time. Rosemary managed to make a small comeback, locking in the one-handed last chancery. Purrazzo gets a hold of the injured arm and she breaks the hold off. Rosemary gets a guillotine and tries to turn it into the as above so below. Purrazzo blocks and counters things, locks in the Venus de Milo. Rosemary makes the ropes and Purrazzo stomps on Rosemary's bad knee, removes her knee brace, and Rosemary hits a desperation spear for near fall, but then she tries to follow up with the red wedding, but her knee buckles and allows Purrazzo to hit Costa Nostra for the win. Match is probably one of the better of the night overall. Then we go to the Impact World Champion, Kenny Omega, with Don Callis defeating Moose to retain. Commentary team is interesting. Tony Schiavone of AEW, Scott D'Amore, and Don Callis. I guess you'd have almost an AEW dominance here. Um, basically, Moose has had an issue with Omega almost from the beginning, and then he wins the Under Siege six-person number one contendership match to earn the deal. There's an agreement between Scott D'Amore and Tony Khan that the match would take place in Jacksonville, giving him a home advantage as it relates to Sami Callihan in the future if he can get past Moose here. Story of the match is very basic. Moose has a power advantage. Omega can't even get Moose to move. He manages to hit Moose with a dive, but Moose is again dominant when they get back in the ring. Omega dodges moonsaults and nip-ups and hits a few standing moonsaults of his own. Moose continues dominance outside the ring, handling Omega left and right, and then Moose goes for a dive. Omega dodges, and Moose goes crashing and burning into the sitting area, just like Omega had a chance to turn the match around. Omega works on Moose's arm and sold the injured arm and missed the dive on the floor. Moose then makes a comeback and gets a near fall. And Omega starts to go for V-triggers and dragon suplexes. Strike exchange, Moose, and the power advantage continues for Moose. Moose basically goes on and on around the deal here. And, he actually looks pretty strong from an Impact representative standpoint. Then they start striking exchange, and then Omega went for the arm and hits a Tiger Bomb for near fall. Omega follows up with some more V-triggers on the injured arm. He calls for the One-Wing Angel, but has trouble getting Moose up and kept him out there. AEW's doctor comes in to check on Moose's arm, but Moose pushes him away, and he wants to keep going and actually fight. Hits top rope Spanish Fly out of nowhere, which actually makes no psychological sense. Moose then goes for lights out on Omega, but Omega pulls the referee in and takes the most of the hit. Young Bucks run down and super kick Moose a whole bunch of times and hit the BTE trigger, and they help Omega hit the One-Wing Angel, leading to Omega picking up the win. So after the match, Sami Callihan is there. He takes out the Bucks and Omega. Callis confronts him. Callihan teased doing to Omega what he did to a couple of Eddie Edwards a while back with the bat and hitting him in the eye. Callis fired Callihan, and D'Amore confronted Callis, and they go back to the show as they go off the air. In any event, cluster mess of a finish, but some people like Omega. I don't. I honestly think it's bad that he's the representative for AEW and Impact at this point, but other people would vastly disagree. Overall, the show was fine as a standalone, entertaining event, but I don't think it does enough for storylines to warrant having taken place. In any event, we'll be back with more right after this.